There's plenty of exciting stories like that, and I think the big one for me that stands out, one of the top ones that comes to mind, is the first engagement I was ever on, which is water treatment facilities. So any critical infrastructure where the government has tons of money to blow on like
Yep.
actually doing security right, and then you see like just the shortfalls of implementation or human element behind things. It's always fascinating to see that, but also pretty intimidating. I think from like I had urban exploration as kind of my background before this, and it's also been a really cool thing for me. And maybe I should take a moment to thank like my hacker fame. Like I came into this industry not knowing anything. It was after college. I graduated with a marketing degree. I'm like, shit, things are getting real. I had to figure out what I'm going to do for money, but I also want to be in a career that I'm passionate about. And that eventually led me down the road to physical security, entries and break-ins, and I was doing a lot of urban exploration at the time, and then found a job and a career that allowed me to exercise those demons in a professional, productive manner that helps improve the state of the world to some degree. Security isn't everything, but it's a really cool thing to be a part of. So going down that road, let's see. I guess the first engagement, water treatment facilities. Getting to break into government grade facilities. So going from nothing, like urban exploration, like who's this kid? I'm like, I was with a much more senior tester than I was at the time. His name's Dan. And I talk about this in some of my talks, but that engagement of, how we approach things and like kind of my perspective from being maybe street trained is like the way to say it
Hmm.
versus like, the discipline of like being book trained and like what you can read online. So what you're saying about things being dynamic or changing or not going the way that you expect it to. The big takeaway for that was our initial approach on the first facility. Looking at the aerial images, Dan charted out a path, and I'm from Florida, and we're working in a part of the country that's pretty similar and swampy. And he's like, "Oh, we're gonna take this route down here, circle around, and get in." I'm like, "All right, man, Dan." That kind of looks pretty swampy. I mean, from Florida, man, if there's one thing I know, like that's what we're looking at. That's a swamp. And why don't we take this route? Like it's a wide open field. So like obviously, yeah, much bigger concerns there, but maybe that's kind of the street smart type of thing to it is understanding people aren't vigilant and on guard at the perimeter of the facility overlooking an empty field for like years on end, right?
Hmm.
Waiting for the one day somebody comes up and approaches things, right?
Right.
Which also there's a huge segue in there about testing in a natural, typical environment rather than alerting your security team and having them, be in hyper vigilant states for
Yep.
that week while
Oh
you're
man.
there and making
Yep.
it artificial, right? It's killer. Happens and there's use cases for it, but typically no, we like it normal. Just testing normal. If that's normal state, go for it. So we're looking at things. I'm like, man, let's just go across the field. We can like waltz right up, go in the back door, no problem. We go Dan's route. I defer. He's more senior, and this is my first official live engagement for corporations. Huge for me. So I'm like, all right, we're gonna do it your way. So we get on site, we park, we hop into that swamp, we hop the fence, and I have a wonderful picture of him too. So this is another thing too. Like maybe I was naive or cavalier about things, but I also wanted to report fodder, things that we can throw in the report. And I took a flash photo of him in the woods, which of course
Oh.
it illuminates everything. Like for miles away, like I get you. Line of sight from where it was to the facility we're working on. We're like 2 miles out at that point. I didn't think it was a concern. Turned out not to be, and that can go either way. So take what you want out of it. We do that, hop the fence, and we're in the swamp. I mean, splash, touchdown. So, if you're worried about being overt, it's the footsteps that'll give
Yep.
you away the entire time, too. It had to be 3 or 4 hours to go those 2 miles. I mean, crawling, hugging, staying low. And there was a military base nearby, and then the jets were flying overhead. And every time a jet passed over, we were able to book it and make a little bit of headway and go that route. Still took us 4 hours later, and we get to the back gate, which is wide open. After seeing everything else pretty secure throughout the facility, we get in there and then just carte blanche, able to do everything that we needed to on site. We ended up hitting that facility twice. When we came back the next time, we did it my way. We took the open field and just 20 minutes, walked right in the facility, did everything we need to. So the
And you're
learning
dry, right? So it's not odd if someone sees you.
right, exactly. So I mean that's it to me in a nutshell. Things going to plan or deviating or changing course while you're live and on site, but that had to be one of the funnest experiences going on an engagement like that and seeing that facility for the first time. I mean, places, I think, as like an urban explorer, you experience some abandoned places like that, but to see
Mhm.
it live and running and like the show and works and dodging live people, but still having your bulletproof vest, that get out of jail free card, and like, hey, are we going to use it? How's that go? And then some people in the industry at that time too had an ego, and this is what I've been hearing before I got on site for that engagement was, oh, I've never been caught before. I never had to use my get out of jail free card. And nowadays, after being more mature in our role, I'm dead set the opposite for two reasons. One is what a wonderful inoculation for yourself as a tester to have that get out of jail free card and talk your way through it, see when you really do need to produce that,
Mhm.
or if you can get in that confrontation and talk your way out of it and never have to deploy it. But if you were an urban explorer, you never go up, you never try that route, typically and generally speaking, right? Um, and then the alternative, I think, for the client too is you need to establish that baseline. So it's not just owning them and making yourself look good and having all this cool report fodder and saying, "Hey, here's how we blew open the doors and everything was totally insecure." You also need to like throw the client a bone and say, "This is what did work." And after you go in covert, I like to raise my level of ridiculousness almost and get to a point where the client does detect us. And sometimes you have to get crazy ridiculous, but we need to identify and establish that baseline so then the client understands, all right, this is where we're at. Here's all the room for improvement.
When you're going on this first engagement, that sound like the first time you went through the swamp, you're doing it at nighttime, right?
Yep.
And now today, with your experiences and many successful engagements underneath your belt, do you prefer to go into a building, let's say, during business hours or during nighttime? Like, what is your preferred entry time?
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for saying that. It's totally preferred. I think that's up to each individual tester, right? I
Mm-hmm.
love going in at night, getting the lay of the land, understanding how things work. I mean, you can still feel the environment and the office buzz even at night and understand how like the relationships between coworkers or their role in the organization even at night. And that's just, I mean, I think partly for safety for us, partly so you have a successful engagement. My biggest fear is the client pays whatever we're charging nowadays, or the rates that we all get in this industry for a client for to send two consultants on site for a week can be 10, 20, $30,000
Mm-hmm.
easy. I would hate to fly on site and then get burned right away and then just blacklisted from the
Right.
facility, right?
Yep.
So for me, that helps introduce more control and understanding of what we're getting into. Then the next day, I'll come on site during the day, do the social engineering. And there's also advantages to that, too, for being able to come on late at night. Say a building locks down over time after hours, right? But during the day, you have public access and you can tape up a latch, preferably inside where you're not exposing a vulnerability to the outside world for everyone.
Yep.
But making sure you have more leveled approaches and, it makes things a little bit different. So my personal methodology, come in on site, get the lay of the land, exploit, and you can really capture just about everything and be able to get in and out that way, I think delivers a lot of impact and value to the client and helps us be a little bit safer and then give them a fuller engagement. Then we can go on site the next day and have more of an idea for a social engineering pretext. Because I think what you wanted to ask about too is the trade-off that we have versus attackers that have, no time constraints and can work on this for a year versus we're on site for 1 week and we have no time for surveillance and getting the lay of the land first.